My name is David Barr. I'm a sculptor. I think of myself as a creative worker. That is, I enjoy work, I enjoy doing my work, and I don't define myself narrowly by that. I suppose I'd say I'm a sculptor primarily and known as that, but it's not the way I limit myself. I do full-scale pieces, I do reliefs, I do conceptual pieces, I write. I've written a book and I'm working on several others. I've made a number of films. I'm interested in all kinds of creative expression. I divide my life up into different scales of work, global projects, public-sized projects, and more intimate kind of projects. And I also divide my life up into doing things that are immediate personal expression, and also a certain amount having to do with education, educational projects, and nonprofit projects such as Michigan Legacy Art Park. Everything that I'm doing comes from trying to understand the world around me in some way. And nature is a tremendous source of that. If you look at a seashell, if you look at a leaf, if you look at a root system of a plant, there are all kinds of organizing principles that are going on there that are, to me, fascinating, beautiful things that I can translate into artworks. And I'm interested in creating in those artworks an experience that you haven't had. I'm not interested in competing with nature. So I don't want to do a drawing or a painting of a tree when I think a tree is perfectly fine. I don't have to compete with it. But I want to understand a tree. I want to understand a flower. I want to understand a seashell. But I'm also trying to understand human beings, human nature. Why do people do the things that they do? Why is a culture the way it is? Why are there these terrible misunderstandings between people? So it's the underlying structure of human beings and the world around me is what drives my work. What I learned is that if you start and are willing to pay for an apprenticeship, do a lot of what other people will think of are very simplistic things and very ordinary things, but you're learning a new vocabulary, a new way of working. So you take a form, a square, let's say. You take a square and you begin to explore all of the different ways in which you can relate that square. I compare that more to music. A musical note is essentially boring. One note is nothing, you know. It's the relationship of notes that's everything. And people have no trouble forming relationships of notes. A square is in itself boring, but a relationships of square does not have to be boring. Now you can do something new with it. You can create your own melodies. You can create your own patterns. If you geometrically analyze a seashell, for instance, it all falls, the seashell and the arcs within it all fall along golden rectangular relationships. So I will, in a sense, eliminate the copying the seashell, but work with the forms and the arcs and the spirals and things that are inside of that. And that's a sort of a liberating thing, just as it would be for a musician to sit down and make a piece of music and say, I'm not going to mimic a bird call or the sound of waves, but I'm going to use notes in a way that's sympathetic to that. Another pattern that has been in my work for throughout it all years, I've never been bored with it. It's called the Fibonacci series. This is a series of numbers that was extracted from nature by Leonardo Fibonacci, about 12th century Italian mathematician. The numbers themselves are 0. You add a number to its next number is how you do it. So it's 0, 1. 1 and 0 makes 1 again. So it's 0, 1, 1. Then 1 and 1 makes 2. Then 2 and 1 makes 3. So far, pretty boring and predictable. But if you go 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, notice you skip 4, then 8, then 13, then 21, then 34, the two numbers before it going along. These are also numbers that you can turn into spatial relationships. If I'm working with a composition, I can divide up the space in these kinds of relationships. I can find different ways of manipulating that space to extend those sort of ideas. And I find that there's something in that that's inherently harmonious. But what you'll see of my work is mostly these smaller reliefs, which are called they're on a series that I've been doing for the last year or two called a tangent series. It's not all that I do, and those are, it's an old mathematical and geometric realization that you can define something like a circle without using circles. So you can do it with a series of flat lines on a tangent to the arcs. And I just got intrigued with working with that. And so a lot of the reliefs are spin-offs of that. There's a larger piece that's outside called Sonata, and that has a series of mathematically determined arcs that I think have a certain harmonic relationships that goes between them, and putting those out. And in my relief work, what I'm trying to do always is combine color and form. I'm not too interested in illusions, creating illusions. I'm interested in creating color-form relationships. That's what I think a flower is. It's not just a form, it's not just a color, it's a color and a form. When you do a relief, such as the piece behind me, throughout the day it changes. The character of the light will change it a lot more than it will change a painting. Your position relative to it will change a lot more as you walk around it, and as you see it, you discover new relationships, new phenomena. So a lot of the pieces in there were about that. I do a lot of other pieces in stone and steel, and a majority of my time now has probably been spent in recent years more on monumental, big outside pieces. So when I began thinking about these things in the mid-70s, I began thinking, is there some way in which I can think of doing projects in public, in the world, that people can share, mostly through either seeing it or thinking of it. The first project I did like this called Four Corners Project. And I tried to think of what would be the largest sculpture in the world with the least amount of material. So if you think of a tetrahedron, which is like a pyramid, except the bottom is a triangle, not a square, it's only 4 sides to it. And I'd already been doing a lot of sculptures with tetrahedrons, interested in them, and then relating them to spheres. What occurred to me is if I had a sphere but thought of that as the Earth, and then imagined a tetrahedron inside of the Earth, it would touch at just 4 spots. Thought, what if I go to those 4 spots and put down a little tiny corner? The alignment will be the largest sculpture that can ever be built with the least amount of material. So then I tried to think of where would that be? Well, I sure didn't want to put it down in already heavily finance dominant cultures, to go to Paris or something like that. The 4 spots I picked out were Easter Island, Africa, New Guinea, and Greenland. And it took me 9 years because I financed it all myself, going to those places and putting down this outer corner, documenting it all. writing about, in the end, I've written about all the cultures involved and the people I met and the adventures of it all, which were very interesting. Then I did a project on the US-Canada border. My father was British, my mother was Canadian. They met in Canada. Those of us who grow up in Detroit think of Canada all the time. It's right there, it's part of you. And yet I started to think that as far as I knew, there was nothing commemorating in art that border, which is the largest, longest peaceful border in human history. Well, that's kind of interesting to me. So then it has other interesting characteristics to it. It follows the path of the sun. The sun goes right over that. So I picked out 3 spots in the far east coast, Campobello Island, which is off of New Brunswick in Maine. And I put in a part of a stone arch there with a woman's handprint on it. And then the first place the sun hits every day is that, in America, is that stone. You know. Then I lined up another one in Lake of the Woods, that's at noon, Lake of the Woods, Minnesota. And another one at Point Roberts, Washington on the West Coast. So, and that project's called Sun Sweep. And that took me a couple of years to do in finance. All of these projects, I have to go to the people that live there. I have to meet them. They don't know whether I'm selling them some piece of junk or what I'm doing, you know. I have to get them to trust me. I have to find a way physically to do it. They're tough. They're not, you don't just back your truck up and put it down. There are things to do. And so there's many other aspects, you know, to the story, to carrying this thing out. What I feel that the goal of an artist or a musician or a writer, anybody in the arts, is to create consciousness, become more awake. I think we live in a world that's very numbing, and people just keep themselves busy all the time. They have on 2 TVs in the house and plus a headset, and then they get on the phone, you know. I believe so much in trying to raise consciousness. And when we look at the political mess that the country's been in, was that a plan, or is it just because people weren't thinking about it, you know? It's how do we get people to become awake and aware and alive, fully alive, and enjoy what's around them. Just to see what's there. So I'd say that's been my mission in my life, is to, as a teacher and as an artist, is to try to convey some of that, what for me is very, very important.